Hi everybody, I'm Brandon. Thank you so much for watching the channel. Today I'm out here with the 2000 Camaro SS. Now what makes this a little bit special versus a Z28 is that it has the ram air induction hood, which upgraded horsepower for this year from 305 to 320. Now it's long been believed that GM was underrating both the Z28 and SS versions of this car to keep a little bit of distance between the Corvette. This one also has the 6-speed manual, and I like this particular car because it is the awesome red color along with the black contrast roof and the ever necessary, in my opinion, T-tops. Please comment down below what you think of this car. Do you like the way it looks? Do you know anything about the performance? And would you buy one? Now, I was going to talk a little bit about why I like this car so much, but I'm going to save that for another video. So please stay tuned for an upcoming video on why this car. First on the list, we're going to do a walk around, then we're going to take some performance metrics and give some driving impressions. We're then going to do our real-world fuel economy loop, discuss ride quality and take some sound levels. We're going to do a little bit of curb clearance and driveway clearance tests. We might do a suspension flex test. We're going to review the maneuverability of the car. Then we're going to look at practical stuff like cargo space. We're going to see what fits in it, how people fit in it. We're going to take some measurements, talk about comfort, quality, and the ergonomics of the interior. Then I'm going to get into what I've fixed on this particular car and service to restore it to good condition. And finally, I'm going to wrap up and tell you about what I have planned for this as well as my overall verdict. Let's get right into our walk around of the car. At the front, this is the last of the 4th gen styling. It's the 1998 to 2002, which is sort of this rounded catfish look that some people have unkindly compared to a Chrysler Concorde of the time. I don't necessarily disagree with that. A lot of it has to do with sort of the ovoid headlights and this round fascia area. I do think I prefer the 1993 to 1997 more shark nose looking cars, as well as the Firebirds and Trans Am of this generation. But overall, I love the silhouette of this car. I like the rake of the B-pillar and the wraparound back glass, especially when it's in a contrasting black like this one. I also like the SS-specific spoiler on this car that wraps all the way around in an arc and then smoothly flows into the rear fenders. This is one of the things that differentiates it from one of the base V6 models, an RS, or a Z28. This was the top dog of its day, and that spoiler is one of the ways to tell, along with the 17-inch wheels with the 275 width tires front and rear. And then of course at the front, the major differentiator is the ram air induction hood, which was good for getting this car from 305 horsepower to the rated 320, which we all know GM was probably lying about, and it's actually more. I also love the way the mirrors sweep right up from the front fender line and the hood line directly into the mirrors. Of course, we have T-tops, and this one does have the black leather interior, which I think is ever so appropriate. Now, I have redone the upholstery on these front seats recently, so there are a little bit of wrinkles still in them, but with some heat and some use, they are working their way out. Inside, we have a no-nonsense but functional interior. One of the things I like about these cars is they do have full instrumentation with a speedometer that reads up to 155. And this is actually one of the few cars that can meet that. Supposedly, these were good for about 158 miles an hour, maybe 160 on a good day. So you can bury this. We do have coolant temperature, we have volts, we have our fuel gauge, of course, and we have oil pressure, much appreciated. This car does have the Monsoon audio system, which does have a subwoofer in it, and it is pretty powerful for the day. This one actually sounds pretty good still. The AC on this car works great, which I greatly appreciate, and this does have a Tremec T56 6-speed manual transmission. This was one of the things, in my opinion, that set it apart when these cars came out in 1993. It was actually one of the few cars that had a 6-speed manual transmission in its day, and definitely one of the first at such an inexpensive price point. Now, as you can see, interior quality, typical GM of the era, not too great. These front seats are reasonably comfortable, though they don't offer a ton of lateral support, so not the best for track days. In the back, as you can see, this is a 2+2 coupe. And these seats are surprisingly comfortable so long as you can fit behind whoever is sitting in front of you. I would say that I prefer these to the extended cab of a compact or mid-size pickup truck. They are better than that. Very wide door sills, and these doors are pretty heavy. Let's take a look under the hood. So here we are under the hood. We have the 5.7-liter LS1 V8. This engine debuted in the 1997 Chevrolet C5 Corvette, and it quickly made its way into the Z28 and SS Camaros, along with the Firebird formulas over at Pontiac and the Trans Am and Trans Am WS6s. What makes a WS6 or a Camaro SS like this different than their Z28 or lower formula and standard Trans Am counterparts is they do have the cowl induction hood, and that helps feed air directly into the airbox. Everything under here is pretty straightforward and simple to work on, though I do find that it is a little bit of a tight fit for some of the components in here. Let's take a look around back. So at the back, we do have a hatchback. So this lift gate on the car is fairly large and fairly heavy, and it's actually a bit difficult to close when the doors are closed because you're displacing a lot of air. And this is one of the things that made it unique from the Mustang of the era that started in 1994, as that car moved to a two-door coupe body style with deck lid. So I do think that the Camaros and Firebirds and Trans Ams are a little bit more practical from a cargo hauling standpoint. As you can see, we have a very deep well, and there's actually a rubber cap at the bottom of this. So I suppose if you wanted to line it, you could use it as a cooler. Carry some frosty beverages or soft drinks. We also have a cargo cover here that folds back. Now it's currently in its undeployed position because I have the T-tops in here. And this is one of the things that I appreciate that GM did. They made a spot for both T-tops to slot into nicely, and then by closing the latch, they lock themselves in. So while they can move this way, they can't pull out, and they're fairly secure in there. And you still have a decent amount of room behind them, as well as up on the parcel shelf area above the rear axle. And of course, these seats do fold down. So if you're only hauling 2 people, you can fit a lot of cargo. We'll take a look at that later. So check it out, we ran a 6.31 0 to 60, and it really was an issue of traction. It's also kind of warm today, so I don't know how much better we're going to be able to do with the limited traction. Really have to feather the throttle to keep from overwhelming the tires. second run, we ran a 5.980 to 60, so we are under 6 seconds, which isn't too bad for this 24-year-old car with 178,000 miles, but we'll give it one more try. So our third run, 6.15. I think getting under 6 is about the best we're going to do today. It is kind of warm, and we don't want to smoke the clutch. And our test site is about 340 feet above sea level, and it's near 90 degrees, actually 88 degrees Fahrenheit today. So that definitely affects performance, but I think most of the 320 ponies are still present even after all this time. Okay, before we do our 60-0 braking test, we're going to check the brake temperature. Right now it's showing around 115, 113, 118. And at the rear, also in the 113 to 120 range. Okay, our 60-0 wheel measured distance. So on that stop, we measured right at about 129 feet. Not too bad. Okay, so we're going to measure our second 60-0 stopping distance. And stop. And that came in just under 123 feet, which I don't think is too bad. It's a pretty hot day today. The surface of the road's kind of rough and could use a stickier, newer tire. Okay, on our second braking test, the temperatures are now at about 250 degrees. And at the rear, showing about 180 to 190. So what is the Camaro like to drive? It's actually much better than I ever thought. You know, after all these years, I thought it was going to feel super dated and maybe a bit antiquated back to its third-gen roots in the 80s. And it just doesn't. And I think the LS powertrain is part of it. I think the Tremec T56 is a piece of it. But really, the handling is the piece that is better than I expected. I thought it was just going to feel kind of floaty and like it just couldn't handle itself on the road. But on a curvy road like this, the steering doesn't have any slop. I have replaced all of the linkage components. So everything that was worn out, all the bushings are new again. You know, we have new struts, we have new shocks in the rear, and it drives like a perfectly modern car, except it has more steering feel than most of the new electric power steering racks. And I think a lot of that is just a testament to the fact that this still has an old school hydraulic rack. There's no slop in the steering. It's quick enough, it's not super slow. So it handles a road like this just fine, but it's also not too quick that it's darty on the highway. It has really strong brakes. Acceleration's still pretty strong. I mean, we got a 0 to 60 of under 6 seconds, even with 178,000 miles on the car, and pretty hot day non-ideal conditions with kind of crummy traction. So I'm perfectly happy with a true sub 6-second 0 to 60, not corrected for any factors like the magazines do. That was just what we got right out of the box with an amateur driver. This is a car that's actually pretty good on the back roads. You know, it's not for the kind of stuff like autocrossing per se, or that go-kart kind of, you know, 15 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour curve roads like a Miata just loves to eat up. But on something with sweeping corners, with medium tight bends, you know, 30 miles per hour, it's got decent grip with 275 width tires. And the other thing, surprisingly little body roll. I expected more body roll, and it's just not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to have that real pony car, muscle car kind of waywardness, where it'd be fine in a straight line, but it would be absolute garbage in the curves, and it's not. And I think with an even better tire on it, you do even better. Now, the one thing you do have to keep in mind is it is a solid rear axle, and so if you hit some bumps in a turn, it probably is going to kick the rear end out a little bit. But it's nothing uncontrollable if you know what you're doing, and it's a perfectly enjoyable car on a road like we're on today. It's kind of a great vehicle to live with on a daily basis. We've got T-tops, we've got big V8 power, we've got strong modern brakes, we've got good air conditioning, we've got a decent enough highway ride. It's not quiet, but it's not so loud that you're just going to be gaining your destination with your ears ringing like I do in my Miatas sometimes. So it can kind of do everything. It'll do day-to-day commuting. It'll do the grocery work around town. You know, you can take 2 adults plus maybe 2 teenagers in here in reasonable comfort, and it's got a lot of cargo space with the hatch. So what would I improve? Well, for one, interior quality. You know, I've mentioned this before, but it just has that terrible 90s GM cheapness to it. And there's no way to really get around that. It does have a few squeaks and rattles, but so do a lot of cars that are 20, 30 years old. So that's not unexpected. Looks-wise, you know, overall, I love the silhouette of this car. I think it's just got a great 90 Aeros look. It looks fast. I do prefer the earlier 93 to 97 more shark nose car to the more rounded front end on this one, but you do get better headlights with it. So, you know, there is a trade-off, a little bit better aerodynamics as well. If you can find one of these for a decent price with good maintenance, and especially if it has low miles at this age, I'd say, yeah, pick it up. I do know that there's actually decent aftermarket performance support for this car. If you really want to make them handle, you know, you can put in an upgraded K-member, or you can do coilovers on the front, you know, you can upgrade the steering components on it, but you don't need to. But if you do want to make it handle really well and maybe even autocross it, there are ways to turn it into one of those. Out of the box, the LS1 has good power, but you can also hop that up. You can keep it naturally aspirated, put a cam in it, get some different heads for it. All that'll give you more power. You can also go the supercharger route. Of course, being an LS, you can turbocharge it. So really the sky's the limit if your budget can stomach it. Definitely one of the weaknesses that I've experienced with the 4th gen cars, this one included, are just some kind of crummy power steering components. The pumps go out, you know, the racks can fail on them. The usual things like, you know, transmission bushings, engine mounts, those things fail over time, and engine mounts aren't the easiest thing to do on this car because you have to drop quite a few things. Speaking of maintenance, I would say doing repairs on these are kind of a mixed bag. Some things are really easy to get to, and some things are just not. You know, most of the mechanical components are readily available, and the prices are fairly reasonable on them, so that's not a hindrance. So if you're a DIYer, it's also a decent car to own. Had a nice little drive today. Thanks for hanging out with me. Moving on to the next segment. Quick update, I am at another station because the pumps just completely failed at that other one, so I'm going to reconduct the test. It'll be slightly different mileage. I will put it in text what that new mileage is going to be. So I'm going to top the Camaro off, and we're going to rerun this test. Again, filling up with 91. Okay, there was our first click. We're going to wait 30 seconds and do another click. All right, our 30 seconds have passed, so we're going to do one more click. Okay. Should still be somewhat near 40 miles or so. Our other test was supposed to be 50.2 on the dot, but hey, what are you gonna do? So as a reminder, we run this test right between 65 and 70 miles an hour in the top gear. And on this car, cruising RPMs are pretty low, usually around 1500 or 1600. And it's less than a mile onto the freeway, and we don't really get stopped, so that's not gonna affect our highway miles per gallon too much, but hopefully we will do okay on traffic. It is getting a little bit into the afternoon, so we shall just have to see how that goes. And I accelerate in such a way as to get up to highway speed moderately, maybe shifting at 2,000, 2,500 RPM. But on this car, it doesn't take much to get up to speed. We're turning between 1,500 and 1,600 RPM at about an indicated 69, 70 miles per hour. Hopefully we'll be able to pretty much cruise at highway speed for the entire loop. This one's a little bit shorter than the normal 50.2 mile loop because there was an issue at the gas station that I normally use. I am going to have to do something about that and maybe alter the loop and pick a different one, because that particular Chevron, their vapor recovery nozzles just cause me problems. It doesn't matter what pump. I've had that problem on multiple cars. But hey, this is a real world test. This is how things work in the real world. You'd experience the same kinds of things. Nothing's perfect, but I'm rerunning it for you guys so that we can try to get as accurate an idea as possible of what real world highway mileage looks like on this car. I think these LS1 motors and these 4th gen Camaros and the C5 Corvettes with manual transmissions might surprise you. So we'll see what the final number is at the end. As a reminder, I do conduct these mileage tests with the AC or heat on, depending on time of the year, to keep it at a comfortable roughly 70 degrees Fahrenheit, just as you would probably all do. I'm not going to try to hypermile and do anything weird to try to get some extraordinary mileage number, but just use the vehicle like you probably would. And the elevation for this test ranges roughly between about 300 to 700 feet above sea level, but the point at which it climbs is fairly short, and any of that is canceled out by the return trip, which is pretty much just a mirror image of this one. So most of the test is fairly close to sea level, roughly 400 to 500 feet on average. One thing about highway behavior on this car that maybe is a little annoying is it does do a little bit of tram lining when you have these rain grooves or a line that is running parallel with the lane that you're in. And I think that's mainly a byproduct of 275 width tires at the front and the rear. Tire compound, tread design, those can all have effects on that as well. But it's not too bad. It's not like, in something with a real race spec summer tire on a narrower, lighter car like my Miatas. But sometimes one of these grooves will just pull you a little bit. So I'm showing about 82 degrees right now. I have our background noise cancellation on, because otherwise it shows up a little bit loud in the video with the road and wind noise on this car. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sound check here at 70 miles an hour. See what our decibels are reading. And while I do this, I'm going to turn the background noise cancellation off, though this will actually sound louder than it is in the car. So it seems to be measuring between 76 and 77 decibels average. So that's a bit noisy by my standards. And what you mostly hear in this car on the highway is a lot of road noise, particularly coming from the back hatch area and then some wind noise around the A-pillars towards the top where they meet the T-tops. And then you do hear a little bit of exhaust rumble under engine load, but that's not an objectionable sound. I kind of like it. It sounds really good. So what's the ride quality like? On the highway, I would say for a sporty car, it's fairly acceptable. I'd maybe give it a 5.5 or 6 out of 10 on smooth roads on highways like this. The only thing you really feel is kind of some high frequency jittery vibrations coming through, and I think that's more maybe because of the tire choice or maybe a tire imbalance than anything else. You'll see some of that show up in the camera flutter, but it's not a harsh ride by any means. It's on the really rough roads where I think it's a little bit more objectionable. So to describe what that's like, or to show what that's like in an objective way, I have a 3-axis accelerometer that is mounted on a board that sits on its own on the passenger seat. So let's take a look at that. And I won't have a good baseline for how this compares until I do this on a couple more vehicles, but we'll look at the spikes and watch how that is on a smooth road. So we see all of the X, Y, and Z axes right now, and it's really the Z that is the vertical up and down motion that I think best captures ride quality. I do love T-tops, but one of the things that isn't so great about them is if it's really hot out, you can get baked in the sun a little bit. Now they do have solar reflective properties, so you shouldn't be getting burned from them, but they do transfer a bit of heat into the car, so AC on hot days is necessary. Okay, we've arrived. So our impromptu redo mileage loop ended up at about 37.6 miles per the car. I will verify that with the GPS and recalculate if needed, but right now I'm going to calculate off of 37.6. Okay, we are filling back up with 91. Okay, clicked off. I'm going to wait 30 seconds. Took 1.304 gallons. Let's calculate. So we have 37.4 divided by 1.304 gallons, and that gives us a total of 28.68 miles per gallon. So 28.7 miles per gallon, almost 29. I think on a longer trip, similar to this, speeds 65 to 70 miles per hour, this car will do a true 30 miles per gallon. So I think that's a great result for something with 320 horsepower, and it's also this old. I just filled up again, did our double click 30-second method, and we are about to start our city loop mileage test on the Camaro. This loop is right at a GPS verified 25.5 miles. It'll probably take an hour, maybe even a little bit more. We conduct this test in fairly dense traffic and, you know, at the high point of the day to get an idea of really what mileage is like when you're just cruising around town. For the most part, you know, I'll be sticking to the speed limits wherever possible and the flow of traffic. So stick around and we'll see how this turns out. As always, light to moderate acceleration. Around town, I'll probably be shifting at no more than 2,000 RPM. And stay tuned towards the end of this loop because I'm going to do another ride evaluation with our accelerometer on the bumpiest road that I know of in the area. So let's see what those plots look like. So around town, I'll probably be running 5th gear most of the time if I'm moving. Turns about 1,300 to 1,400 RPM at around 40 miles per hour. But we're generally going to keep with the speed limits of the streets that we're on. So this car has something that really infuriates me. It's this skip shift. And it was common on, well, it has been common on LS-powered manual GM cars for years. It forces you to shift from first directly to fourth under light throttle and acceleration. And it's just so annoying because the car bogs down on the shift to fourth. It comes on at the most annoying time. There is a solution for it, Muzzy Skip Shift Eliminator. They're really inexpensive, and it's a device that just plugs in at the transmission. You get underneath the car, plug it into the wiring down there. It's super simple, and it makes that feature go away. So I highly recommend that if you have one of these LS-powered cars, LS1, 2, 3, with a manual transmission and skip shift, because I just hate it. You just bog. And basically what it does is it locks the gate so you can't get the shifter into second or third from first gear when you're accelerating lightly. Hate it. Just hate it. There it was again. Okay, so we are arriving at our first stop, which is the weight scale. So if you're in the San Diego area, Sullivan Moving and Storage, come hit them up. They can probably help you with your moving and storage needs. No, not sponsored by them, just throwing a shout out to a local business. And they have a scale here that I often have gotten my vehicles weighed at, mainly my trucks, but I want to weigh the Camaro for test purposes. So I'll be right back. Hang on. That was super quick, thanks to Sullivan Moving and Storage. They gave me my weight for the car. It is 3,380 pounds, and that is full of fuel, no passengers. So kind of your worst case scenario without a bunch of cargo in it and before people. So I think that sounds about right. One of the funny things about this car is because of the way the torque is produced down low, and when you're just cruising, say like this in fifth gear at around 35 miles an hour, the torque's almost enough to just keep the car moving on its own. It takes very little throttle input or extra power. For those of you in Michigan or Colorado who I've often heard say you have the worst roads in America, I don't know. I've been to both those places. I think San Diego might challenge you, which is pretty sad because we don't have the cold temperatures and the deep freezes that you guys do. It's just simply a matter of poor infrastructure maintenance. We definitely have our fair share of potholes that will blow out a tire or bend a wheel. I know a lot of people who have had that problem. The car's trip meter is showing right at 12.7 miles. 12.8 now, so we've just about hit the halfway mark here of our 25.5 if we're to trust the car. So the only three ways to avoid the whole 1 to 4 skip shift annoyance is to either shift from 1 to 2 extremely early, like before 1500 RPM, let it rev out a bit longer well past 2000 RPM, and or put your foot in it. There actually is a fourth method, and that's to basically make the world's slowest shift. It may block you out, but if you wait between the 1 to 2 while the clutch is in, it'll eventually drop what I think is a pin that will then allow you to get the shifter into the second gear gate. It's just so annoying. I'm actually going to show you these couple methods for not getting blocked out of your second gear shift. So, easily accelerating, shift super early. It almost caught me at 1500 RPM. But there was method 1. Shift super early under light throttle. Okay, method 2. this one, you see the light comes on. If you keep going to about 2500, it goes back off, and then we can make a shift from 1 to 2. Okay, method 3. That one just means you have to accelerate harder, which is fun, but the reality is it's not always practical when you're just kind of putzing around town. So method 4, we're gonna get it tripped. And I'm gonna try to make my shift. I just make the slowest 1 to 2 shift possible. And then it allows me in the second gear gate. So tell me in the comments below, what do you think of this skip shift feature? I find it absolutely detestable, but maybe you don't mind it. Let me know. I'm going to show you what our ride looks like on the accelerometer here. So here's what it looks like when we're at rest. And here's what our super bumpy, worst case scenario road looks like. We're also measuring above 80 decibels for a lot of this. Now, one of the things about this car is it does skip around a little bit from the rear end if you hit a bump under cornering, because it does have a solid rear axle. Okay, so we are just pulling back up to the gas station. We'll fill it back up, do our 30-second click off, and see what kind of mileage we got in our around town loop. Okay, so there's our result, 1.967 gallons. Okay, let's calculate our city mileage. So we went 25.5 miles, divide that by 1.967 gallons, and that gives us 12.96 miles per gallon, so right at about 13 miles per gallon. By the way, I did just check my tire pressure, and the left rear is measuring a little low, even though I just checked them. It looks like I picked up a nail, so this may have thrown off our city mileage a little bit, and maybe even our highway mileage, because these tests were conducted pretty much back to back. That being said, I don't think it would affect them much, but I think our highway mileage could be anywhere from 29 to 30, and this city probably 13 and 14, which when you're constantly stopping and starting, this is not unexpected for a V8 engine. All right, so I'm in the car now and we're gonna get the turning circle test started. So why am I doing this when you can get these stats online? Well, this all started when one of my cars, actually my Lexus IS350, I realized that it turned incredibly tight, and it allowed me to do this turn all the time consistently that could be a bit tight in the neighborhood. And this car, there was a big difference. So I wanted to start showing you in real time what turning circles look like. So I'm at full lock right from the start until we get the car straightened out. Cone. Lined up. Now, as you can see, I have our measuring wheel squared up with the cone, and we're just going to go over the next cone. And that is showing right at about 37 feet even. So at 37 feet even, let's go check out what this looks like in a real world scenario. Okay, this is a U-turn that I do a lot, and I kind of use it as my measure of whether a car is bad at turning around or good. This one's got a pretty big turning circle for its size. Notice the big long front overhang as well as the not very good turning circle, but it does make that turn even with a truck there. All right, let's see if the Camaro can pass the curb test. It's got kind of a long nose and it's a little bit low. I don't think it will. I didn't hear anything. Let's check it out. Nice, it passed. I think it even missed the little air deflector. Let's check how much clearance we have here at the front fascia. So by my measurement, it looks like just over 10 inches, maybe 10 1/4. At our lower air dam / curb tester, we have right under 6 inches of clearance. And the low point on this car is actually towards the center at about the transmission bell housing and transmission pan. So why does this clearance thing matter? Let's show you. Not great when you approach one of those driveway entrances that has a really steep angle. Next, we're going to check some wheel travel. Why am I doing this? This is typically off-roader and Jeep stuff. Well, I say why not? Because I can. Our current unladen ride height puts us right at about 3.5 inches from the wheel well to the top edge of the tire. Now lift it off the ground. That measurement increases to about a little over 6.5 inches, almost 6 3/4. At the back, our unladen clearance between our outer edge tire wall and the wheel well is about 3.5 inches. Now raised off the ground, this thing has tons of clearance. It's looking like right about 6.5 inches from top of the tire to the center of the wheel well opening. Looks like an off-roader like this. Okay, I'm in the car now, and we are going to try our one-wheel ramp test. Our ramp is about 7 inches. Let's see if the car can climb up that, or if it gets stuck and can't make it. Okay, it looks like we passed. So with us passed, our front wheel is compressed and our rear wheel is extended, but it didn't lift a wheel, so off-road approved, sorta. Now at the front, this puts our compressed measurement right at about 3 inches. And at the left rear, we're tucked in there pretty good. And I would say we are at about 1 3/4 inches of clearance. Starting with our luggage test here, you can see that the Camaro actually has a lot of space, especially with the rear seat back folded down. We then do have a large parcel shelf here that sits over the solid rear axle suspension. And because of that suspension design, you have a very deep well. And this well is actually what fits the two T-tops when they are locked into place. So let's go ahead and see what actually fits in here. First test we're going to do is our mechanics test. Let's see if our ramps fit in here. Okay, that sort of fits in the well. All right, and I think that will fit okay and still be able to close. Let's see if we can get our lightweight jack. So I think we're fine as long as we take the handle apart and put it down so that the handle's not sticking up. And that will close. Let's check out what that looks like. So you could still get some more tools up on here and still have your seat back up if you wanted. So it passes the test. Next, let's do our wheelchair test. This is a pretty large wheelchair. So I do think in most cases you are going to have the rear seat back folded, but let's see if this is going to clear the back glass. So, don't think so. Now, if we slide it forward, I do think it will fit. Yeah, and that fits without touching the glass. So, the exception here is you're not going to be able to use your back seat and still be able to get a wheelchair of this size in, but it does fit. And I do think this is one of the advantages on a two-door sporty type car like this, and having a rear liftgate hatch instead of a metal deck lid. I don't think this would ever fit. Next, let's try our snap and go baby trend stroller. This actually allows for 2 seats to snap in. So it is on the larger dimension side. That will not fit down in the well, nor will it be able to stand and still be able to close the hatch. But just like with the wheelchair, it is going to fit with the rear seat folded down and taking up a little bit of space into the back seat area. But because of the width, you still have a lot of room. You've got the whole well here. You have this parcel shelf area, as well as nearly most of the seat back. So I want to see now if we can fit other child stuff. I have a smallish pack and play. And that fits down in the well. We have a smaller single stroller. That fits here just fine. And so at this point, I think you could fit an additional child seat in here. And with that, you could probably fit some more suitcases in here too. There's still a good amount of space in front of that stuff and behind the front seats. Let's see how that looks. So as you can see, our extra large base for the 2-seat stroller, our single narrow stroller in the center, our child seat, our Diono, our pack and play down inside of the well, and then you still have a good amount of space here in front of this stuff behind the front seats. So again, the advantages of a hatchback, and just so everybody can see, it does close. Next, we're going to be doing our standard cargo test, which is to see if the full number of passengers that the car is rated for can also accommodate that same number of carry-on suitcases. So again, with 1, our deep well actually can take it upright. With 2, I don't really see a way. You can kind of jam them in. And these are all carry-on size. Our rear seat back is currently up. So we can get 4 in there, so it does pass the test. I'm trying to see if we can get 5 in here. I don't think that's going to clear. No. So if you're willing to have a suitcase in your visibility area behind you, no, that doesn't work either. So to take 5 of these, I think you're going to be relegated to having somebody hold one. So this is what it looks like currently with 4 carry-ons. Now this well just has a couple little odd shaped pieces in it to accommodate the T-tops, And I think that impairs our ability a little bit to getting more in here, along with this little step up. And there's just not quite enough room to slot that in there. But it does pass our 4 suitcase plus 4 passengers test. I do want to point out that the liftover height into the cargo area on this car is fairly high. We are looking at right about 36 inches to this sill, so about 3 feet. And the sill itself has a depth of about 22 inches. So just be aware of that if you are shorter in stature or trying to lift heavy things into here, or large things like a wheelchair. It can be a little bit of a bear to get in there. Also note, there is no spare tire. You could fit it in that deep well, but that would compromise a lot of the cargo space and take up the area where you would store your T-tops normally. Moving on to our child seat test. First, let's try our rear-facing seat. Note, I do have the front seat slid up all the way and the seat back reclined forward. So, because of how short this bucket is down here, I really don't think that this is a good idea. You could probably do something to make it work, including filling that void space in the footwell, but I don't think this would be a safe setup. Let's just see if we can put the seat back in its least reclined position that it locks. And I'm going to say that's a no. It does not work with this particular car seat, so not a safe idea. Now let's check the Diono forward-facing child seat. This is decently short on the bottom. And so as you can see, the bottom of it is about the length of the bottom cushion. So I think this is acceptably safe. Now you don't have any of the modern latch or ISOFIX attachment points for these, so you will be stuck exclusively using the 3-point belt to secure this, but I do think it's doable. Now, you have a decent amount of space with this seat up and with it back at a position that an adult can sit in. I think something like this is still workable. So I'm going to say that's a pass on the Diono seat. Now you could remove those seat bottoms to try to get your child seat in, but I don't think that's a great solution. You know, it's kind of a pain, but if you had to do it, maybe you could. I'm not going to do it for this test. Next, what I want to show you is my comfortable seated position in this car and what that looks like. So this keeps my legs at a comfortable position. This is about where I want my arms. Now, one of the things that I do not like about this car is it has the old school GM tilt steering column that has these just indentation positions, and it doesn't give you a lot of fine control. You can get the wheel up quite high, but it doesn't go super low, and unlike most modern cars, it does not telescope in and out. So that limits your adjustability for comfort with positioning of the steering wheel. In this position at 5'11", I do have enough head clearance. I'd say I have about 2 inches of clearance, maybe 3, under the T-tops. And I do have to have the back part of the cushion tilted down a little bit just to get enough thigh support here at the front. These are sort of small buckets. But oddly enough, there's also not a lot of lateral support for a sportier car. The next thing I want to test is whether I can sit behind my seated position. So of course, this is not a very large car. It is a 2+2. It's not even really technically a true 4-passenger. The nice thing is I have good foot space, so that helps me a lot because it means I can get my legs forward a little bit more than you would think. but I cannot pull the backrest into my comfortably seated front position and still fit here well. The only way I can do this is if I splay my knees a little bit. Now, I could tolerate this for going across town, but I wouldn't want to be back here for any length of time. Surprisingly, my head just brushes the roof, but again, I can do this at 5'11", which is kind of surprising. If you have a shorter driver or somebody that's willing to move their seat up a little bit, yeah, it is surprisingly doable. Here inside the Camaro, we have our controls for our headlamps and our dimmer, our power window locks and mirror switches. We have remote steering wheel controls for the audio system. We have our cruise control on the broken chicken wing feeling stock that GM puts in. Definitely one of their worst things from this era. We have these nice large buttons on our monsoon audio system, which actually sounds pretty good. And I like the large tactile controls that somebody without great eyesight can easily see or just push by feel. We have a very simple analog dial climate control system for our HVAC. We have our rear defogger button. We have our fog lamp button. This is where traction control would be. Of course, our little Camaro badge. And we have 4 dash vents, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Dual airbags, incredibly cheap 90s, early 2000s GM plastics on the dash. A very mechanically robust feeling shifter with somewhat notchy action, but you know when you're in gear in this car. Also like that we have a traditional handbrake. As you can see, our usual GM 90s dark gray and black interior with incredibly cheap material quality on the door panels and pretty much everywhere else. I think our seats are looking a little bit better now that we've got some new upholstery on them. These will settle in better with time. I do like this throwback to the 90s with our ashtray. And with that, we do have a cigarette lighter. Yay! Also have an additional 12-volt outlet, which was one of the things that I liked. GM seemed to put a lot of these in the car back in the day. There is this flip-out cup holder for the passenger. Extremely flimsy little thing there. We have an additional cup holder right here. And then 2 cup holders behind the armrest for the 2 rear passengers, or if you're greedy as the driver like me and have multiple drinks, now you have 4 total cup holders, none of which are very effective at actually holding any kind of beverage. I guess these were good for 12-ounce soda cans in the 90s, so you can hold your Surge and your Tab in here. We have an incredibly cheap feeling center console lid with okay storage space, our ever so necessary coin holder to pay our tolls. We do have some somewhat useful door map pockets on both sides of the car. But you don't have a lot of storage space. Unfortunately, this wasn't a big thing back in the day, but you do have some. This can't even hold a modern cell phone, so you're going to be relegated to putting it in the center console or letting it sit on your passenger's lap. As far as speakers go on our monsoon audio system, from what I can tell, we have 6 speakers. We have 2 in the very back. We have 2 beneath the sail panels at the B-pillar area, and we have 2 in the doors. So surprisingly, this sound system has a lot of power, I think, especially for the day, and a decent amount of bass. So if you like a factory audio system from the 90s, early 2000s, you could do worse. We do have an average size glove box. And I will say, one of the things that I like about this car, along with a lot of other 90s GM cars, is that the ergonomics for the controls are fairly comprehensive. I like all of these controls on the steering wheel, and everything falls readily to hand in a way that is just intuitive. You know, you have a nice big volume and tuner knob, something that shame on the modern manufacturers for getting rid of. Bearing all of this in touchscreens has definitely made for a less tactile experience, and it forces your eyes away. These controls all are very intuitive without even looking to them. You can make adjustments to everything, and I appreciate that. So what do I think of visibility? It's actually better than I expected. You know, this is a lower car, but you sit well above the door sill in here, unlike one of the modern Camaros from 2009, 2010, the 5th and 6th generation, which you feel like you're looking out of gun slits, front, center, and to the side. This one is not bad at all. You can't really see the front part of the hood because there is a lot of slope on it, but I love how you do see this nice bulge from the ram air hood. Again, panning around, good visibility out the side because you sit much higher than the sills. Towards the back, you do have some rather large B-pillars at the sail panel area. But again, view out the back isn't too bad. So I think modern cars, for the most part, especially sporty ones, are much worse than this. And of course, you do not have a backup camera, so being able to see out of your rear view mirror, it does matter. What do I think of the interior overall? Well, I think functionally, it's pretty good on the ergonomics. The materials are just cheap and they're poor. They don't look very good. If you love gray and black, this is the place to be. But they don't feel very nice. And some of them don't wear very nice. That being said, this is true of a lot of vehicles from this time. So, moving on. The driving position is okay. It's not terrible. It's not the best I've ever felt. For me, at my height of 5'11", I can reach the steering wheel okay. It's not too far. It's not too close. I do wish there was a little bit more height adjustment and reach adjustment, though, just so I could get it really fine-tuned in some smaller increments. I have enough head clearance. I definitely have enough leg room here. And all of the controls fall right to hand, especially coming off of the shifter. I will say I think the shifter placement in this car is much better than the contemporary Mustang of the time, any of them that were based off of the Fox body from 1979 through 2004. Yeah, this is a superior position for the shifter versus in those cars where it was extremely far forward. So real quick, I want to go over what all I've done to this car. Keep in mind it does have 178,000 miles and it is 24 years old. A lot of this that I've done was not because there was anything wrong with the car inherently or that these cars are unreliable. It's just age-related stuff, mainly things that would be preventative maintenance and things that you would expect at this mileage and age, along with taking care of just little leaks, because I do not like leaks. So first off, I replaced most of the steering components, the tie rod ends, upper and lower control arms, ball joints, as well as put in a new power steering pump because it was whining, along with a new power steering pump high pressure line. So that got things steering properly and got this car to where it was safe again, which was my #1 concern. I had to put on some new front tires also for safety reasons. They were just aged out and worn out. I did front struts and rear shocks because those were the original. It wasn't riding very well and there wasn't much compression damping anymore. I did a new transmission mount bushing because the shifter was rising up under acceleration. Again, it's rubber and it deteriorates with time. We did a new rear tail shaft seal at the drive shaft because that was leaking a little bit. To take care of oil leaks, I did valve cover gaskets, a new oil pressure switch and seal there. Also did an oil pan gasket. Again, this car was just leaking a little bit and I don't like leaks. Also did knock sensors while we were in there because I had to check engine light. I put in a new secondary air injection pump, which has to do with the emission system on this car, which is needed to pass California emissions. Did new spark plugs just because I could, because we were already in there. Put in a new water pump and front timing cover. I put in new door lock and window switches on this car because those weren't working. Those are just not very good parts on these cars. Also put in a new shift boot. That's more for cosmetic reasons. Nothing functionally wrong. Resealed the rear hatch glass. That was leaking a little bit. Again, some of these seals dry up over time. Put in a new power seat base because the motor wasn't working very well and it was kind of hanging up. I did new front seat leather upholstery because it was torn and I don't like that. I like to have my cars, even the old ones, back original in the way they were supposed to be from the factory. Also, I resoldered the body control module, which is basically up under the passenger side of the dash. That wasn't too hard of a job. I did that because the radio was cutting out intermittently and also causing my windows sometimes not to work. So that's a common problem on these cars. There's a couple solders that just get a little cruddy over time, but if you redo them yourself, doesn't really cost anything. If you have a soldering iron, fixes the problem right up. I also adjusted the clutch pedal position switch, and that just measures that the clutch is fully disengaged. Didn't even have to replace it, I just had to thread it in a little bit. That was causing the cruise control not to work because it thought the clutch was depressed. And finally, of course, did all fresh fluids for the engine, transmission, and cooling system, just because, again, it's an older car and wanted to get things back up to where they should be so that this car has many more years left in it. All right, overall, you know, for the price I paid for this car, it was well worth doing all of that, and I know the car has a lot more miles and many more years left in it. So as I wrap up, what are my plans for the car? Well, I'm going to sell it because even though it was my childhood dream car, it's not my current dream car. I do think these are great and I'm really glad to have had the experience with it, but I need to sell it because I need the space for more projects and I need to free up some cash. So as we wrap up, what are my plans for the car? Well, I'm going to sell it because I need the space for other projects. While it was my childhood dream car, it's not necessarily my current dream car. So what are the pros? I'd say it has practical people and cargo accommodations in a slick aero package. It's easy to maintain. It has ample, inexpensive repair parts and aftermarket support, and maintenance is usually not complex. Some of the cons, well, cosmetic, interior, and body parts are getting harder to come by as the cars, even the newest ones, are over 20 years old. Interior quality is typical 90s and early 2000s GM. It's not very good. Many things look and feel cheap inside, and there's also the usual signs of GM cheapness in some other areas of the car. Reasons to consider, I think that these have possible future appreciation. So get them while the prices make them attainable. The maintenance parts are plentiful for them. So why should you consider one? Well, I think these are currently undervalued. I think there's room for potential appreciation in these. They don't have the iconic factor of the Gen 1 or Gen 2 cars, nor some of that 80s cool factor that some people see in like the IROC versions of those cars. But I'd say this is actually a much better car than the third gen cars. Obviously, it's a much better daily driver than any of the Gen 1 or Gen 3 cars. It's just more modern. It feels like a decently modern car that you can live with every day, and you can continue keeping them on the road. They run great. This one has 178,000 miles, and I wouldn't hesitate to drive it anywhere in the country. It runs awesome. So what's my verdict on it? Well, my take is that it's a budget buy modern classic with strong performance, and it won't punish you with difficult and costly maintenance like some of the European brands. Now, if you haven't already, please go down below and comment. Let me know what you think of this car. And until then, please subscribe, go do something nice for somebody today, and I'll see you next time.